My daughter was dying all alone in a palliative care ward in Los Angeles. At the very same moment, her husband, that smug Wall Street banker she once loved so fiercely, was laughing it up in Malibu with another friend, completely oblivious to her condition. When I learned this, an hour later, that man lost more than just everything he had. He lost absolutely everything. And I, John Smith, a plain, unremarkable man they all saw as a harmless old-timer, was just truly beginning to live. Or rather, I was just beginning to collect on a very old, very expensive debt. The stale, recycled air of LAX still clung to my clothes, heavy and somehow sterile, when my phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number, a Los Angeles area code. I rarely answered unknown calls, a habit from a life I'd long since buried, but something about this one, phantom prickle on the back of my neck. I answered. Mr. Smith? This is Dr. Rachel Lee from Cedars-Sinai. It's about your daughter, Emily. The words hung in the air, cold and precise. My daughter, Emily. Suddenly, the sterile air felt like ice in my lungs. I remember the last time I'd seen her, 3 months ago. Vibrant, full of life, even if there was a growing weariness in her eyes that she tried to hide. Now, the doctor's tone, the hospital's name, it all clicked into place with a sickening thud. What about Emily? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, betraying none of the sudden tremor in my hands. She's been admitted. Her condition has deteriorated rapidly. We've moved her to palliative care. Palliative care. That term, innocent enough on its own, carried a leaden weight for anyone who knew what it truly meant. It wasn't about getting better. It was about making the end as comfortable as possible. I'm on my way, I said, ending the call before she could offer condolences or details I wasn't ready to hear. The taxi ride from LAX to Cedars-Sinai was a blur of sun-drenched freeways and sprawling urban ugliness, a stark contrast to the tidy, predictable world I'd built for myself back east. Every mile felt like 1,000. My mind raced, trying to piece together how this could have happened. Emily was only 34. Healthy, or so I'd thought. Always so careful. She wouldn't have told me if something was seriously wrong. She had that stubborn pride, just like her old man. Especially when it came to her husband, Aiden. She always wanted to appear strong, independent. Cedars-Sinai, a gleaming monument to modern medicine, an imposing structure of glass and steel. Yet, inside, the corridors felt like a maze, each turn bringing a new wave of fear. The hospital smell, that clinical blend of antiseptic, stale coffee, and something vaguely metallic, tightened my chest. I gave my name at the reception, my eyes scanning the faces around me, searching for familiarity, a sign. Dr. Lee met me in the waiting area of the palliative wing. She was a young woman, sharp and empathetic, her eyes tired but kind. Mr. Smith, thank you for coming. Where is she? I cut straight to it, my voice gravelly. She led me down a quiet hallway, the carpet muffling our footsteps. Each door we passed felt like a barrier to a secret, a tragedy. The air grew heavier here, thick with unspoken grief. She's in room 312. Her husband, Aiden, he hasn't been reachable. We've tried his office, his personal line. No answer. My jaw tightened. Aiden, of course. That perfectly coiffed, impeccably dressed son of a bitch, too important for a dying wife. A cold knot formed in my stomach, distinct from the grief. This was something else. An old, familiar anger, long dormant, began to stir. We reached the door. Dr. Lee hesitated. She's not conscious, Mr. Smith. She hasn't been for a day now. Her kidneys are failing. It's only a matter of time. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hand went to the doorknob, metal cold beneath my fingers. I pushed it open. The room was bathed in a soft, dim light. A single window offered a view of the LA skyline, indifferent to the quiet tragedy unfolding within. Emily lay on the bed, small and frail, almost swallowed by the white sheets. A tangle of tubes and wires snaked from her body to various machines that beeped softly, rhythmically, marking the dwindling seconds of her life. Her face was pale, almost translucent, her lips parched. The vibrant woman I remembered was gone, replaced by this ghost. A profound, ancient sorrow washed over me, threatening to buckle my knees. This was my little girl, my Emily, the one who used to chase fireflies in our backyard, whose laughter was sunshine, whose dreams were as big as the sky. She had wanted to be an artist, to paint worlds of color and light. Instead, she chased a different kind of dream, a gilded cage built by Aiden's ambition, his promises of a life of ease and luxury. Now, here she was, alone, fading away. I pulled a chair close to her bed, ignoring the machines, ignoring the sterile smell, focusing only on her. I took her hand, so cold and thin. "Emily," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Oh, my sweet girl." The doctor, sensing my need for solitude, quietly slipped out. I sat there, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest, a cruel, mechanical imitation of life. My mind, usually a fortress of logic and controlled emotion, was a swirling tempest. Questions, accusations, regrets. Why didn't she tell me? What happened? I pulled out my phone. My fingers, steady again with a strange, dark resolve, found Aiden's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice slightly slurred, background noise of distant laughter and clinking glasses. "Yeah? Who is this?" he drawled, annoyed. "It's John, Emily's father," I said, my voice low, dangerously calm. A beat of silence. "John? What's up? Is Emily okay? She's been a bit off lately, you know how she gets. Stress." "She's not okay, Aiden," I said, my grip on Emily's hand tightening. "She's here, at Cedars-Sinai, palliative care." Another pause, this one longer. Then a chuckle, a hollow, utterly detached chuckle. "Palliative care? What? Is she finally giving up?" "Look, John, I'm in Malibu right now. Big deal, you know? With the boys. And a few new faces. Tell her I'll swing by tomorrow. Early. She'll understand. She'll understand." The words were a venomous dart, striking me through the haze of grief. Malibu. With the boys. And a few new faces. My daughter was drawing her last breaths, and this man, her husband, was celebrating. I didn't say another word. I just slowly, deliberately pressed the end call button. The line went dead. I looked at Emily, her still pale face. The love, the sorrow, the rage, it all coalesced into a single burning point. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just indifference. It was an insult, a profound, unforgivable betrayal. As if sensing my anguish, her hand, still clasped in mine, twitched. Her eyes, half-lidded, flickered open for a bare second, unfocused, distant. And then, as if she gathered every last ounce of strength, a faint vibration on my phone. A message, sent just 2 hours ago. It was from Emily. "Papa," it read, her familiar emoji heart at the end. "He did something. I'm scared. The will. The will." The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a tragedy. This was something far, far worse. This wasn't just a daughter abandoned. This was a daughter wronged. And in that moment, as the final, faint beep of one of the machines flatlined, as the nurse rushed in and Dr. Lee returned with a look of profound sadness, I knew two things with absolute certainty. My daughter was gone. And Aiden Marshall had just sealed his own fate. The man who had taken everything from my daughter was about to learn what it truly meant to lose it all. And I, John Smith, was the one who would teach him. The room grew quiet, save for the hushed condolences of Dr. Lee and the efficient, almost clinical movements of the nurses. They were kind, professional, but they couldn't touch the void that had just opened in my chest. Emily's hand, so warm moments ago, now felt impossibly cold. I watched them disconnect the machines, the silent, orderly dismantling of a life. Each removed tube, each switched-off monitor, was a further erosion of her presence. My daughter, my vibrant, complicated Emily, was gone. I sat there for a long time, even after they had gently covered her with a sheet. The world outside the window continued its indifferent dance, the city lights beginning to prickle against the darkening sky. But my world had stopped. It wasn't just sorrow, though that was a raw, gaping wound. It was a cold, hard emptiness that felt strangely familiar, a feeling I hadn't known since a very long time ago. I ran a thumb over the last message on my phone, her final, terrified plea. Papa, he did something. I am scared. The will. The words echoed in the silence of the room, sharpening the edges of my grief into something razor-sharp and dangerous. This wasn't just a natural tragedy. This was a crime. And Aiden Marshall, in his callous disregard and, I now suspected, far worse, had made it personal. He had stolen my daughter's last moments of peace, and in doing so, he had woken something in me that I'd sworn to keep buried forever. My mind drifted back, not to the last few minutes, but to decades ago. Emily, a little girl with bright, curious eyes, always sketching, always dreaming. She'd inherited her mother's artistic soul, but my stubbornness. She was headstrong, brilliant, and fiercely loyal. We'd had our differences, as all fathers and daughters do, especially when she announced she was moving to Los Angeles, leaving behind the quiet, academic life of New England for the glitz and hustle of Hollywood. She wanted to work in animation, to bring her characters to life. And then she met Aiden. He was everything I distrusted. Polished, charming, with that slick, predatory sheen common among young men who'd risen too fast on Wall Street. He had the right pedigree. Wharton, a fast-track position at a boutique investment firm in Beverly Hills. He promised her the world, a life without financial worries, a grand house in the Hollywood Hills, the freedom to pursue her art without the pressure of making it pay. Emily, ever the romantic, fell hard. And I, like any father, wanted her to be happy. I saw the red flags, the subtle arrogance, the dismissive way he spoke of people beneath him, but I kept my peace. She was an adult. She made her choices. Now, those choices lay here, cold beneath a white sheet. And the red flags I'd ignored had turned into a shroud. Dr. Lee returned, her voice soft. Mr. Smith, I'm truly sorry. Is there anything? I shook my head, still holding Emily's cold hand. Dr. Lee, how often did Aiden visit Emily while she was here? Her expression faltered slightly. Not often. He was busy, he said. We reached out multiple times as her condition worsened. Never got a direct answer. He'd send his assistant sometimes, or just a curt message to relay to us. Mostly, we just spoke to you when we could reach you, but you're on the East Coast, so... She trailed off, her meaning clear. Emily had been virtually abandoned. In her condition, I pressed, my gaze locked onto hers. You said it deteriorated rapidly. Were there any unusual symptoms before she was admitted? She hesitated again, chewing on her lip. Well, yes. She'd been experiencing extreme fatigue, memory issues, chronic headaches, and some severe digestive problems for months. She attributed it to stress, the demands of her job, even some medication she said her husband had recommended for anxiety. Medication her husband had recommended. My blood ran cold. The vitamins for stress that Aiden had, according to Emily's last message, done something with. A dark, ugly suspicion began to form, tightening the knot in my stomach. Did she have a will? I asked, cutting to the chase. Yes, she mentioned it once, Dr. Lee replied. Said she'd updated it recently, or rather, Aiden had insisted she do it, to simplify things for their future. I believe she mentioned it was all set to go to her husband, as a standard. Standard, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. Nothing about this was standard. After the hospital staff had completed their grim duties, I found myself alone in the quiet waiting room. My daughter's body was being prepared, her spirit already beyond my reach. But her legacy, her memory, and the injustices done to her, those were still very much in my world. I pulled out my phone again, navigating to Emily's digital footprint. Her emails, her banking app. It didn't take long. Aiden had been far from subtle. Within minutes, I found what I was looking for. A newly filed will, dated just 2 weeks before her admission to the hospital, completely revoking a prior will that had left a significant portion of her estate to a charity for aspiring young artists, and the rest to me. This new one left everything, absolutely everything, to Aiden Marshall. No mention of a charity. No mention of me. Just him. And then, the financial transactions. Large, unexplained transfers from Emily's personal accounts to various offshore entities, all managed by one of Aiden's shell companies. Money she had inherited from her mother. Money from her own successful animated shorts that had found a niche audience. It wasn't just the inheritance. It was her life's work, siphoned away. A cold, hard clarity settled over me. This wasn't just grief. This was a battlefield, and I was back on it. The harmless old-timer, the quiet man from New England, was gone. In his place stood a shadow from a forgotten past. A past forged in places where men learned to make problems disappear, where justice wasn't handed down by judges, but carved out with calculated precision. My hands, once trembling with sorrow, now felt steady, imbued with a purpose as clear as crystal. I scrolled through my contacts, past names of distant relatives, past numbers from my garden club and my local hardware store. I went all the way to the end, to the one contact I thought I'd never use again. A name I'd kept hidden for decades, a remnant of a life I'd tried to forget. Samuel Blackwood. I typed out a message, short and cryptic, using a code phrase only he would understand. One we'd used in a different lifetime under different skies. The old man is awake. Code red. Then, after a pause, a second, more direct message. Aiden Marshall, Los Angeles. He just stole everything from my daughter. Find him. And then, find his weaknesses. All of them. My thumb hovered over the send button. The silence in the hospital waiting room was profound. I took a deep breath, the smell of antiseptic no longer bothering me. It was the scent of a new beginning, or perhaps an old one revisited. I pressed send. The game had begun, and Aiden Marshall, in his ignorance and arrogance, had absolutely no idea he was already playing. The nondescript bar in downtown L.A. was called the Rusty Nail, a fitting name for a place that looked like it had seen a century of lost hopes and whispered secrets. It was exactly the kind of place Sam Blackwood would choose, dimly lit, with worn wooden booths, a faint aroma of stale beer and desperation clinging to the air, and enough noise to drown out any unwanted ears. Sam was already there, hunched over a cheap whiskey, looking exactly as I remembered him, only grayer. His face, once sharp and hawkish, was now etched with 1,000 lines, a road map of a life lived on the fringes, always observing, always connecting. "John," he grunted, not bothering to look up as I slid into the booth opposite him. His voice was a low rasp, like gravel scraping against concrete. "Took you long enough to wake up the old man." I ordered a bourbon, neat, and took a moment to study him. Sam Blackwood, my shadow, my eyes and ears, my partner in a past life. We'd walked through hell together, built empires from dust, and dismantled others with surgical precision. Then, I'd chosen to disappear, to become John Smith, the quiet widower with a modest pension, a man invisible to the world. Sam, bless his mercenary soul, had always understood. He just went deeper into the shadows. "Some things are best left sleeping, Sam," I said, my voice steady. "But not this. Not now." He finally lifted his gaze, those sharp, knowing eyes meeting mine. There was no pity, no false sympathy, only an ancient understanding. "Emily." I saw the news, the quiet obituary. Young girl. So, it was personal. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He knew my code. My daughter was the one thing that could pull me back. "More than personal," I corrected, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. The ice clinked gently, a tiny, fragile sound in the cavernous bar. Her husband, Aiden Marshall. He let her die alone, and he stole everything she had, every last penny. Sam took a slow sip of his whiskey, his gaze distant. Aiden Marshall, Wall Street's golden boy. Heard whispers about him. Flashy, arrogant, plays fast and loose. Always looking for the next big score, but always covered his tracks well. Ghost in the machine, some called him. Not well enough, I countered. He left a trail. Emily's last message. She was scared. She mentioned the will. And something he did. Sam's eyes narrowed. That was the Sam I knew. The one who could smell trouble like a bloodhound. So not just neglect, active participation. That complicates things. And simplifies them too. "What do you want, John?" "Everything," I said, the word resonating with a quiet intensity. "I want him to lose everything he values." His fortune, his reputation, his freedom. I want him to understand what it feels like to have his life ripped out from under him, just as he did to Emily. Sam leaned back, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. The John Smith I know never settles for half measures. Okay, give me the details you have. Names, accounts, timelines. Everything you dug up on the will and those transfers. I gave him a brief, precise rundown, my words clipped and efficient. Sam didn't take notes. He just listened, his eyes occasionally flicking around the room, picking up on every nuance, every potential threat. This was his element. He was a master of information, of the unseen threads that connected the powerful and the vulnerable. He'll have layers of protection, Sam warned, though it was more of a statement of fact than a deterrent. Expensive lawyers, shell corporations, perhaps some less-than-legal safeguards. He's not just a banker, he's a predator. These types usually build their fortresses well. And we're architects of destruction, remember? I reminded him, a ghost of my own old smile returning. Find the cracks. Find the hidden passages. I'll start with his lawyers. See what kind of smoke they blow. The next day, I made my first official move. From my hotel room, overlooking the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles, I called the law firm handling Emily's estate. It was a well-known white-shoe firm, predictable and arrogant. I spoke to a junior associate named Cunningham, a man whose voice reeked of Ivy League privilege and barely concealed impatience. Mr. Smith, Cunningham said, his tone clipped. I understand your grief, but your daughter's will is quite clear. All assets transfer to Mr. Marshall. There's nothing to dispute. My daughter's last message suggested otherwise. I stated, keeping my voice level, almost deferential. She mentioned being scared and a question about the will. She was ill, Mr. Smith. Confused, Cunningham dismissed instantly. Her mental state at the time of signing was assessed and deemed perfectly sound. We have all the documentation. Any attempt to challenge this would be frivolous and met with swift legal action. Legal action? I allowed a hint of a tremor to enter my voice, playing the part of the grieving, intimidated father. Are you threatening me, Mr. Cunningham? A sigh, heavy and theatrical, came through the line. Mr. Smith, I am simply advising you against wasting your time and resources. Mr. Marshall is a man of significant influence and means. Pursuing this would be ill-advised. Influence and means. The classic playbook. Intimidation by proxy. It was crude, but often effective against the unsuspecting. But I wasn't unsuspecting. I heard the implied threat, the underlying message that I was out of my league. And in that moment, the John Smith they saw vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. I appreciate your advice, Mr. Cunningham, I said, dropping the tremor, my voice hardening imperceptibly. However, I find myself in a unique position. I have nothing left to lose. And when a man has nothing left to lose, Mr. Cunningham, he often finds he has everything to gain. Please inform Mr. Marshall that I will be in touch. Personally, I hung up, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. They want to play hardball? Fine. I knew that game better than anyone. Meanwhile, Sam was already at work. He worked fast, silently, like a ghost in the digital ether. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message from him later that day. Marshall is deeper than we thought, John. Not just standard Wall Street greed. He's been running a shadow fund, funneling investor money through offshore accounts, manipulating stock prices on smaller caps. He uses shell companies linked to his wife's estate to mask some of the transactions. Looks like he was bleeding Emily's accounts dry even before the new will. And a few names came up. Very unsavory characters. Not the kind you cross without expecting a visit in the night. He had also attached a preliminary report, a tangled web of shell corporations, suspicious wire transfers, and a list of names, some legitimate, some clearly not. One name in particular caught my eye, Orion Holdings. A familiar, ominous echo from my past. These weren't just financial irregularities. This was organized crime operating under a veneer of respectability. Sam followed up with a call, his voice hushed. This isn't just about money anymore, John. This is about leverage. And if he was this careless with Emily's money, who knows what else he's covered up? These people, they don't like loose ends. And Emily, God rest her soul, might have become one. My grip tightened on the phone. Emily's last message, he did something, flashed in my mind. The vitamins Aiden had given her. The rapid decline. It all started to coalesce into a terrifying picture. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was an act of calculated, cold-blooded opportunism. Find me everything, Sam, I instructed, my voice a whisper of steel. Every connection, every dirty deal, every lie. I want to know who Aiden Marshall truly is and who he owes. This isn't just about getting justice for Emily anymore. This is about taking down an empire built on the bones of others. And I'm going to use every single one of his weaknesses against him until he has nowhere left to hide. The game was indeed on, and I was just warming up. Aiden Marshall might have thought he was a ghost, untouchable in his gilded cage. But I was the one who hunted ghosts, and I knew how to make them scream. The ensuing days were a meticulous dance of shadows and whispers. I wasn't interested in overt confrontation, not yet. Aiden Marshall was a creature of the light, albeit a corrupted one. He thrived on public perception, on the illusion of control and respectability. To attack him directly would be to give him a target, to allow him to rally his defenses. My method was far more insidious, a slow, methodical unraveling from within. I intended to starve him of the oxygen he needed. Confidence, trust, and capital. From my temporary base, a rented, unassuming apartment in a quiet residential area of Los Angeles. The kind of place where a John Smith wouldn't draw a second glance. I began to orchestrate the first moves. My phone, equipped with layers of encryption and burner numbers, became my primary weapon. Sam, bless him, worked like a digital phantom. His reports flowed in a steady stream of damning data. Aiden Marshall was indeed a master of deception. He used a labyrinthine network of shell corporations, offshore trusts in the Caymans and Vanuatu, and a handful of pliant, low-level operatives to mask his illicit activities. This shadow fund Sam uncovered was particularly egregious. A Ponzi-like scheme disguised as high-yield, exclusive investments, preying on wealthy, greedy clients who didn't ask too many questions as long as the numbers looked good. He funneled a significant portion of Emily's liquidated assets directly into this scheme, effectively using her inheritance to prop up his house of cards. My first target, Aiden's business partners. Not the inner circle of sycophants and co-conspirators, but the periphery, the investment managers, the brokers, the high-net-worth individuals who entrusted him with their money. These were people who valued stability and discretion above all else. Doubt was a virus in their world, and I was about to unleash an epidemic. I started with anonymous tips, carefully crafted emails sent from untraceable servers. They didn't make direct accusations, not yet. Instead, they raised questions, subtle asides, hinting at unusual liquidity issues with certain investments managed by Marshall's firm, unexplained fluctuations in client portfolios, and peculiar movements of funds through offshore accounts. I used highly technical financial jargon, the kind that would instantly flag concern for anyone who understood the intricacies of wealth management. You know what's funny about rich people? I mused aloud to myself, staring at the glittering lights of the city from my window. They never see the trap until it's too late. They always think they're smarter, untouchable, especially when the bait looks so good. One email, for example, went to a prominent hedge fund manager in Greenwich, Connecticut, who had invested heavily with Aiden. The subject line was innocuous, regarding Orion Holdings and sub-account discrepancies. The body text was equally bland. Our independent audit flagged some statistical anomalies concerning asset allocation within funds linked to Orion Holdings. Suggest a deeper internal review of associated portfolios for unusual variances. Due diligence is paramount. Orion Holdings. That name, Sam confirmed, was a key player in Aiden's shadow network. Just mentioning it, coupled with statistical anomalies and due diligence, was enough to plant a seed of doubt. These people lived and died by their numbers. Any hint of instability, Any suggestion of an unseen problem would send them scrambling to protect their own interests. The reaction was immediate, if unseen by Aiden. Calls were made. Internal audits were quietly initiated. A ripple of unease spread through his investor base. Aiden, however, mistook this for standard market jitters, perhaps a momentary dip in confidence. His arrogance blinded him. He simply pushed harder, promising higher returns, doubling down on his lies. Which was exactly what I wanted him to do. The higher he built his house of cards, the harder it would fall. Next, I focused on Aiden's public image. He cultivated an aura of effortless success, a devoted husband, a philanthropic titan. All eyes. I targeted his carefully constructed facade. Anonymously, I provided evidence of his philandering to a few gossip columnists who specialized in exposing the hypocrisies of the rich and powerful. Not salacious details, just enough to suggest a pattern of infidelity, a hint of his contempt for marital vows. Mr. Marshall, the esteemed family man, seen dining with a different associate at Nobu Malibu last Tuesday. One gossip blog snippet read, "Perhaps he's just incredibly dedicated to networking," or "Perhaps his marriage isn't quite as golden as his investment portfolios." Again, not a direct attack, just enough to tarnish the shine, to chip away at the pedestal he'd built for himself. People in his world lived by appearances. A whisper of scandal, even unconfirmed, could be deadly. Aiden began to feel the heat. Sam's updates confirmed it. His phone was ringing off the hook. Investors were asking tougher questions. His assistants reported him agitated, snapping at everyone. He started to look for who was sabotaging him, but his ego pointed him in the wrong direction. Rival firms, disgruntled ex-employees, anyone but the quiet, unassuming father of his late wife. The most disturbing discovery came from Sam's deep dive into Emily's medical history, cross-referenced with Aiden's personal finances and contacts. Through a network of informants in the pharmaceutical world, Sam uncovered a dark pattern. Aiden had a contact, a disgraced chemist with a shadowy past, who specialized in synthetic compounds. Among the transactions was a series of payments for a compound known to induce symptoms identical to chronic fatigue syndrome, persistent cognitive decline, and severe digestive issues. Exactly what Emily had been suffering from. It wasn't a lethal poison, not directly. It was something far more insidious. A slow, debilitating agent designed to mimic natural illness, to break someone down physically and mentally, making them pliable, vulnerable. He was slowly poisoning her, John. Sam's voice crackled through the secure line, thick with disgust. Not to kill her outright, but to weaken her, to make her confused, unable to think clearly, to resist. So he could help her change the will. And then, when she was too weak to fight, he left her to fade. A cold, righteous fury, unlike anything I'd felt before, swept through me. It was one thing to abandon. It was another to actively, deliberately engineer a slow, agonizing decline. My daughter hadn't just died. She had been methodically dismantled. "This changes everything, Sam," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but laced with steel. "We don't just take his money and his reputation. We take his freedom, and his life, as he knows it, will be utterly destroyed. It'll be harder to prove direct causation for something like this," Sam warned, "especially with a doctor's diagnosis of natural illness." He covered his tracks well. He thought he did. I corrected, a grim determination setting in. "But no man is perfect, Sam. There's always a slip, always a loose end. We just need to find it." And then we pulled a string. My strategy shifted. Now, I needed to gather irrefutable proof, something that would stand up in a court of law, something that would connect Aiden directly to the slow poisoning of my daughter. And I had a good idea where to start looking, the very people Aiden thought he could easily discard. His ex-girlfriends, the ones he had used and thrown away. They might just be holding the keys to his undoing, because nothing stoked the fires of revenge quite like a woman scorned. And it seemed I wasn't the only one closing in. Sam's last report contained a tantalizing piece of information. "Heard some chatter, John. LAPD. Detective Maria Sanchez. She's been looking into some financial irregularities tied to Orion Holdings. Coincidence? Or are other wolves already circling? A detective. Interesting. Perhaps Aiden Marshall wasn't quite as invisible as he thought he was. My silent war was about to get a very public partner. And that, I realized, could either be a complication or the ultimate weapon. I just needed to make sure she was on my side. Or at the very least, pointing in the same direction. The news that Detective Maria Sanchez was sniffing around Aiden Marshall's financial dealings was a development I hadn't entirely anticipated, but one I immediately recognized as a potential asset. A uniform, a badge, the full weight of the LAPD behind the investigation. That was a force even Aiden's high-priced lawyers and shadowy connections would struggle to deflect indefinitely. My job, then, was to ensure her focus landed precisely where it needed to, on Aiden's crimes, both financial and, more importantly, personal. My immediate priority, however, was still the human element. Information, whether digital or anecdotal, was only as powerful as the context around it. And context, especially with a man like Aiden, often resided in the discarded lives he left in his wake. My sights were set on his former friends and discarded lovers. Sam's initial dive had flagged several names, but one in particular stood out, Michelle Dubois. She was an aspiring actress who dated Aiden intensely for about 6 months before Emily, and whom Aiden had abruptly cut off when Emily entered the picture. She fit the profile of a woman with a grievance, someone who might remember details, however seemingly insignificant, about Aiden's habits and character. Michelle Dubois, Sam confirmed, sending me her last known address and a few social media profiles. She's still in LA, struggling. Bitterness is a powerful motivator, John. She might talk. I found Michelle working as a barista at a trendy coffee shop in West Hollywood, her dreams of stardom long since faded into the daily grind. She was beautiful, even with the tired lines around her eyes, a testament to the brutal realities of chasing fame in LA. She wore a forced smile for customers, but it didn't reach her eyes. She was guarded, suspicious, a survivor. I didn't approach her in the coffee shop. That was too overt. Instead, I observed her for a few days, learning her routine. She lived in a modest apartment complex in Silver Lake, drove an old, dinted Honda Civic, and spent her evenings taking acting classes or drowning her sorrows with cheap wine. She was exactly what I needed. Vulnerable, forgotten, and almost certainly still carrying a spark of resentment towards the man who'd promised her the world and then dumped her without a second thought. I decided on a neutral ground for our initial contact, a quiet park near her apartment, where she sometimes went to read scripts. I approached her casually, not as myself, but as Frank, a retired literature professor with an interest in independent films. I praised her natural charisma, as I'd seen her in an acting class performance, a detail Sam had provided. She was flattered, her guard dropping just a fraction. You know, I said, after we'd chatted for a bit about the struggles of the industry. I once met a young man, a very successful financier, who seemed to collect ambitious young women like yourself. Aiden Marshall. Ever crossed paths with him? I watched her carefully. Her eyes, previously sparkling with a hint of renewed hope, immediately dulled. A flicker of something, anger, pain, crossed her face. Aiden? Yeah, I crossed paths with him. More like he steamrolled right over me. She laughed, a brittle, cynical sound. He's good at that, making you feel like you're everything, then leaving you with nothing. He seems to have a habit of that, I said, letting the words hang in the air. I heard he recently lost his wife, Emily. A shame. They seemed so happy. Michelle snorted, shaking her head. Happy? Aiden? Please. He was happy as long as she played the part. He liked the trophy wife image, the artist-turned-socialite. But Emily was too real for him, too smart. She saw through his bullshit more than he liked to admit. This was it. The door was opening. And what kind of bullshit would that be? I asked, my voice still gentle, almost paternal. She looked at me, a flicker of suspicion returning. Why are you so interested in Aiden, Frank? I offered a sympathetic, world-weary smile. Let's just say I have a personal interest in understanding how men like Aiden Marshall operate. They leave a trail of hurt, And sometimes someone has to pick up the pieces, or at least understand why they were shattered in the first place. Michelle considered me for a long moment, then sighed, as if unburdening herself. He's a user. He's charming, yes, but it's all transactional. Everything is about what he can gain. And he's got a temper. Not violent, not usually, but a cold, dismissive anger. He'd shut you down, make you feel worthless if you ever questioned him. And he liked his secrets. He was always on his phone, making hush calls, talking about investments that felt shady. Then, the crucial detail. Emily told me once, before they were married, that Aiden had convinced her to take some stress relief pills. Said they were natural, helped her focus. He was always pushing them on her, even after they got married. Said they were his secret to success. She started getting really tired, foggy-headed after a while. And she'd forget things. He'd always laugh it off. "Oh, Emily, you're so absent-minded, darling." But it wasn't her. It was weird. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. The corroboration. Not proof, not yet, but a vital piece of the puzzle connecting Aiden to the debilitating symptoms Emily experienced. The vitamins were real, and Michelle's testimony added another layer to Aiden's calculated cruelty. Did she ever mention anything specific about these pills? What they looked like? Where he got them? I pressed, trying to keep my voice even. No, just that they were little white pills, and he kept them locked up, she mused. Said they were exclusive. He was so controlling about them. He'd even get mad if she forgot to take one. Said it was for her own good. I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Michelle. You've been very helpful. Perhaps if you ever recall anything else, anything at all, no matter how small, you could let me know." I handed her a burner phone with a pre-programmed number, just in case. Sometimes, little details become very big details. As I walked away, I felt a grim satisfaction. Aiden was unraveling, piece by piece, not by my hand directly, but by the seeds of doubt and resentment I was planting. His investors were pulling back, his reputation was being subtly tarnished, and now, his former lover had provided crucial testimony. Sam's next update confirmed the growing pressure on Aiden. His firm's stock took a hit, John. Not massive, but enough to trigger alarms. Investors are getting twitchy. He's been seen yelling at his assistants, canceling meetings. His arrogance is turning into desperation. He's looking for a scapegoat. "Let him look," I muttered, watching Michelle walk away, her shoulders a little straighter now, as if finally sharing her story had lifted a small burden. He won't find one where he expects it. Then came the final, most intriguing piece of information from Sam. That Detective Sanchez? She just issued a subpoena for Aiden Marshall's financial records. Broad scope, looking at everything from the last 2 years. Someone fed her something substantial. Someone in the SEC? Maybe, or a disgruntled insider. I smiled. A thin, grim smile that probably looked terrifying to anyone who knew its true meaning. The pieces were falling into place. My carefully orchestrated whisper campaign, combined with Sam's surgical leaks, had achieved its purpose. The LAPD was now officially on Aiden's trail. Detective Sanchez was not just circling. She was moving in for the kill. This was no longer just about me against Aiden. The net was widening. The powerful, unseen currents I'd set in motion were now drawing in the authorities. Aiden Marshall, the untouchable banker, was about to find himself caught between a rock and a hard place. And I, the quiet old man, would be watching from the shadows, ensuring he had no escape. The psychological game was reaching its crescendo. It was time to start closing the trap. The web I had woven around Aiden Marshall was tightening strand by agonizing strand. The anonymous tips to the SEC, the carefully leaked whispers to the financial press, the subtle poisoning of his public image, all of it had created a perfect storm of suspicion and scrutiny. But the arrival of Detective Maria Sanchez on the scene changed the game from a quiet psychological war to a full-blown siege. She wasn't interested in whispers. She wanted hard evidence. And I was more than ready to provide it through channels that would ensure my role remained unseen. Sam and I met in a crowded, anonymous diner, the kind with perpetually sticky tables and lukewarm coffee. He looked tired but exhilarated. Sanchez is relentless, John. She's got a good team. They're digging deep into Orion Holdings, and they found enough smoke to convince a grand jury there's a fire. The subpoena was just the beginning. They're seizing records, interviewing junior partners, freezing a few of his more obscure accounts. Good, I said, stirring my coffee, the lukewarm liquid doing little to soothe the fire in my gut. But we need more. We need to tie him directly to Emily's death. The compound, the manipulation. That's the real prize, Sam. Sam nodded, his eyes scanning the diner. Michelle Du Bois's testimony, if she's willing to go on record, would be a strong circumstantial piece. But we need physical evidence, something that directly implicates him in obtaining and administering that compound. He kept the pills locked up. I recalled Michelle's words. He was controlling about them. That suggests a specific storage place, Sam mused. His office? His home safe? And the source, that disgraced chemist you mentioned. Dr. Elias Vance. He's notoriously paranoid, operates off the grid. Hard to track. I leaned forward. Michelle also mentioned he was making calls, talking about investments that felt shady. Could he have mentioned Vance, or the compound, to someone else? Someone who didn't understand the significance of the time. This was the opening. Sam's network was vast, reaching into the hidden corners of L.A. He started digging into Aiden's call logs, his emails, searching for any connection to Dr. Vance or anyone else in the shadowy world of illicit pharmaceuticals. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, but Sam was a master at turning over every blade of grass. My part of the plan was more theatrical, a psychological trap designed to force Aiden's hand. I decided to leverage Michelle Du Bois again, but this time in a far more direct and dangerous way. I needed Aiden to believe his carefully constructed house of cards was not just crumbling, but being actively sabotaged by those closest to him. I arranged for a chance encounter between Michelle and Aiden. I knew Aiden frequented a specific, exclusive gym in Beverly Hills. I found out Michelle sometimes went there as a guest of a friend, trying to keep up appearances. Michelle, I explained to her, using my frank persona, I need your help. A man like Aiden, when he feels cornered, he makes mistakes. He lashes out. He'll look for someone to blame. If he thinks someone he once trusted is talking, he might just reveal something crucial, something he normally wouldn't. She looked wary. What do you want me to do, Frank? Just listen, and perhaps subtly imply you know more than you let on, I instructed. Mention Emily, mention the stress pills. Don't accuse him directly, just plant the seed of doubt that you know something specific. Make him nervous. Make him think you're loose and he needs to tie up. Michelle hesitated. That sounds dangerous. It could be, I conceded, meeting her gaze steadily. But it could also be the key to bringing down a very bad man. A man who used and discarded you, just like he did my daughter. This isn't just for Emily, Michelle. It's for everyone he's hurt. The appeal to her own lingering resentment, her own sense of injustice, worked. She agreed. I equipped her with a tiny, high-quality audio recorder disguised as a piece of jewelry, with precise instructions on how to activate it. Just be yourself, Michelle. Be charming, but subtly knowing. Let him feel your unspoken accusation. The encounter unfolded exactly as planned. Michelle, dressed impeccably, bumped into Aiden in the gym's lounge. He was visibly stressed, agitated, his usual polished veneer cracking around the edges. He tried to dismiss her, but Michelle, empowered by her purpose, held her ground. Aiden, darling, she purred, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. You look absolutely dreadful. All this stress with your firm. Darling, Emily gone, such a tragedy. You know, she used to talk to me about you, about how much pressure you put on her. And those vitamins you insisted she take, always wondered about those. Aiden's face, already tight with strain, went ashen. He glanced around, paranoia clouding his eyes. What are you talking about, Michelle? Emily was sick, and those were supplements for her anxiety. Oh, really? Michelle arched an eyebrow, a picture of innocent skepticism, because she seemed to think they made her sicker. And for a bright girl like Emily to just fade away, and then for her will to suddenly change, it just seems so convenient, doesn't it? almost as if someone wanted her out of the way, and well, we'll sort it out. The air crackled. Aiden's eyes narrowed, his anger bubbling to the surface. You don't know what you're talking about, Michelle. You should stay out of things you don't understand. His voice was a low growl, laced with genuine menace. Oh, I think I understand plenty, Aiden, she replied, her voice now cool, losing its earlier sweetness. And I think others do too. Emily wasn't the only one you toyed with, was she? You leave a lot of broken pieces behind, darling. And sometimes, those pieces, they find a way to talk. Aiden's face contorted in a mask of fury. You say one more word, Michelle, and I will make sure you never work in this town again. You hear me? Never. He jabbed a finger at her. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Oh, I think I have a pretty good idea, Michelle countered, her fear replaced by a steely resolve. And so do others. People who care about justice. For Emily. For others. Aiden, seeing that his usual intimidation tactics weren't working, simply spat, "You're pathetic," and stormed off, his expensive gym bag slung over his shoulder like a weapon. Michelle met me an hour later, shaken but triumphant. He threatened me, Frank. He was absolutely furious. Excellent, I said, a rare, genuine smile touching my lips. You did perfectly. I retrieved the recorder. The conversation, including Aiden's threats and his thinly veiled acknowledgement of the vitamins, was crystal clear. This recording, combined with Sam's latest breakthrough, was the final nail. Sam had found Dr. Elias Vance, not through traditional means, but through the dark web, specifically a forum where individuals sought bespoke chemical solutions. Aiden, in his typical arrogance, had communicated with Vance using a secure but ultimately traceable messaging app. Sam had hacked into Vance's encrypted files, revealing a trove of communications between Vance and Aiden, detailing the precise compound, its effects, and crucially, Aiden's instructions for its administration to Emily. Even more damning, Vance had kept meticulously detailed notes on the payments, and Aiden had even foolishly described his wife's increasing compliance under its effects. He literally documented his own psychological torture of her. John, Sam said, his voice grim. This isn't just a smoking gun. This is a small arsenal. With the recording from Michelle and Sam's irrefutable digital evidence, I knew it was time to move. I passed the anonymized, untraceable files, the communications with Vance, the compound details, and the audio recording to Detective Sanchez through a dead drop, leaving no trace of my involvement. An hour later, Sam forwarded me a news alert. Breaking: prominent Wall Street banker Aiden Marshall arrested on multiple charges, including financial fraud and conspiracy. LAPD cites compelling new evidence in ongoing investigation. I watched the news report on my laptop. A frantic-looking Aiden Marshall, his expensive suit disheveled, being led away in handcuffs. The smug arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. His empire was collapsing. His carefully constructed world was in ruins. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the expensive kind I usually reserve for quiet contemplation. I raised it in a silent toast. Emily, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Justice. For you. The game was over. Aiden Marshall, that self-absorbed predator, had finally learned his lesson. And I, John Smith, the innocuous old man, was finally ready to step out of the shadows, not to claim victory, but to find a measure of peace. The trap had closed, and Aiden Marshall was caught. The public unraveling of Aiden Marshall was swift and brutal, a spectacle played out across every major news outlet, a testament to the efficient work of Detective Sanchez and the undeniable weight of the evidence I had silently provided. For someone who thrived on public image, the fall was not just a legal catastrophe, but a complete annihilation of his carefully curated identity. I watched it unfold from my rented apartment, a silent observer to the chaos I had unleashed. News channels plastered his mugshot across their screens, the once smug face now drawn and terrified. Financial analysts scrambled to explain the sudden implosion of Orion Holdings, citing a cascade of investor withdrawals triggered by the fraud allegations. His multi-million-dollar house in the Hollywood Hills was now crawling with FBI agents and forensic accountants, seizing documents and assets. His lavish cars were being impounded. The image of the untouchable Wall Street titan had shattered into a million pieces. Detective Sanchez, in a televised press conference, spoke with a stern, unflinching authority. She detailed the intricate web of financial fraud, the shell corporations, the illicit stock manipulations. She mentioned unnamed, highly credible sources that had provided crucial initial intelligence, nodding vaguely in the direction of where my ghost-like trail ended. And then, she dropped the bombshell that truly sealed Aiden's fate, a detail that resonated far beyond the cold numbers of finance. "We have also uncovered compelling evidence," she announced, her voice unwavering, suggesting Mr. Marshall engaged in a prolonged pattern of physical and psychological manipulation of his late wife, Emily Smith Marshall, through the surreptitious administration of a debilitating chemical compound. This, coupled with the suspicious alteration of her will just prior to her death, is now the subject of a homicide investigation. Homicide. The word hung in the air, cold and definitive. It wasn't just fraud anymore. It was murder. A slow, calculated, agonizing murder. Michelle Dubois, though not named, was referred to as a key witness whose testimony had corroborated initial findings, linking Aiden to the stress relief pills. Dr. Elias Vance, the disgraced chemist, had been apprehended attempting to flee the country, and his testimony, along with the detailed digital records Sam had extracted, became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. The phone rang. It was Sam. "You hear that, John? Homicide. You played this perfectly. That son of a bitch won't see the light of day for a very long time. Probably never." There was a quiet satisfaction in his voice, the pride of a craftsman admiring his finished, deadly work. "It's not over until it's over, Sam," I reminded him, though a flicker of grim satisfaction did warm my own chest. I want to see his eyes when he realizes exactly who brought him down. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Aiden, in his desperate attempt to grasp at any remaining shred of control, had demanded a meeting with his legal team, and surprisingly, Detective Sanchez had agreed to allow it in a controlled environment, likely hoping he would inadvertently reveal more. John Smith, simply showed up at the police station, dressed in my usual unassuming attire, a plain button-down shirt, a worn jacket, my everyday eyeglasses. I gave my name to the desk sergeant, stating I was Emily's father and wished to speak with Detective Sanchez. She met me in a small, stark interview room, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Smith, I appreciate you coming in. I understand this is a difficult time." "It is," I agree, my gaze steady. "I heard about the new charges. The homicide investigation. My daughter, she deserved better." Sanchez nodded slowly. "She did, and we will ensure she gets it. The evidence we've gathered, thanks to some very thorough work by various parties, is overwhelming. We have Marshall's direct communications with a chemist detailing the compound. We have witness testimony about him administering it. We have the revised will, his financial motive. He's looking at life without parole, Mr. Smith." "Good," I said, a dry, almost bitter taste in my mouth. "I have one request, Detective. Before he's moved to a holding cell, before he disappears into the system, I want to speak to him, just for a moment. One last time, from father-in-law to son-in-law." She looked at me, a long, assessing look. I saw the intelligence in her eyes, the faint hint of suspicion that I was more than I seemed. She knew I had played a part, even if she couldn't prove it. But she also saw the raw grief, the quiet determination, and perhaps a desire for something more than just legal justice. 5 minutes, she finally said. "Under supervision. No physical contact. You understand?" "Perfectly," I replied. They led me to a small interrogation room. Aiden was already there, slumped in a chair, handcuffed, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair disheveled. He looked utterly broken, devoid of the arrogant swagger that had defined him. He barely registered my presence at first, his eyes fixed on the blank wall. A guard stood by the door, impassive. "Aiden," I said, my voice cutting through the sterile silence. He flinched, his head snapping up. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, were now wide with a frantic, desperate fear. He recognized me, the harmless old man, the man he had dismissed, ignored, and whose daughter he had destroyed. You, he spat, a spark of his old venom returning, laced with disbelief. What are you doing here? You had nothing to do with this. I walked slowly towards the table, stopping a safe distance away. I looked at him, truly looked at the pathetic shell of the man who had ruined my daughter's life. You know what's funny, Aiden? I asked, my voice dangerously calm, barely above a whisper. You always thought you were the smartest man in the room, the untouchable one, the ghost in the machine. He sneered, a pathetic attempt at defiance. This is your doing, isn't it? You old fool. You couldn't just let it go, could you? Emily was sick. She was useless. The last word, useless, struck me like a physical blow, igniting a cold fire within. I took a deep breath, reining in the rage. This wasn't about anger. It was about finality. Emily was a vibrant, talented young woman, Aiden. I corrected him, my voice flat. She was just unfortunate enough to fall in love with a soulless opportunist. You took her inheritance. You systematically poisoned her. You left her to die alone in a hospital bed while you were off chasing cheap thrills in Malibu. Aiden scoffed, though his eyes darted nervously. You have no proof of that. It's circumstantial. Oh, we have proof, Aiden, I said, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face. That calm smile my construction crews knew meant someone's about to learn a very expensive lesson. Every last piece of it. The communications with your chemist, Dr. Vance. The detailed notes about the compound. Your own boastful emails describing Emily's compliance. And a certain recording made by a very disgruntled former lover, where you admit, quite clearly, to knowing all about those vitamins you gave her. His eyes widened, the color draining from his face. He remembered Michelle. He remembered his threats. He remembered the arrogant dismissal. And then he saw me, truly saw me, without the mask of the unassuming father-in-law. He saw the cold, calculated intelligence, the steel hidden beneath the ordinary exterior. He saw the man who had orchestrated his downfall. Hey, you were behind this? He stammered, his voice weak, trembling. The leaks? The SEC? The police? You the old man. An hour later, remember? I said, my voice barely audible, yet resonating with chilling finality. That's what I told you. An hour after I hung up the phone and watched my daughter take her last breath, you lost everything. Your money, your reputation, your freedom, and now, your life as you know it. I told you, Aiden. I promised you, and I always keep my promises. His eyes filled with a dawning horror, a slow, terrifying realization of the depths of his undoing. He looked at me, not with defiance anymore, but with a profound, soul-deep terror. He saw the predator, the architect of his destruction, in the guise of a quiet old man. Time's up, the guard said, stepping forward. I turned to leave, but paused at the door, looking back at Aiden, who is now just a quivering mess of a man. Emily finally has peace, Aiden, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. And you get to live with the consequences of your choices for the rest of your miserable life. Then I walked out, leaving him to the silence, to his fear, and to the crumbling ruins of his empire. The chess match was over, and the king, caught in my final brutal checkmate, had fallen. The news cycle moved on, as it always does, hungry for the next scandal, the next collapse. Aiden Marshall, once the darling of financial journalism, became a cautionary tale, a fleeting mention in the business pages, then faded into the criminal justice beat. His name, once synonymous with success, was now synonymous with fraud and murder. Orion Holdings was dissolved, its assets liquidated to compensate defrauded investors. Dr. Elias Vance, the chemist, received a lighter sentence in exchange for his full cooperation, detailing Aiden's specific instructions and the nature of the compound. Michelle Dubois, after initially being hesitant, bravely provided her testimony, her story lending powerful human weight to the prosecution's case. I watched it all, not with elation, but with a quiet, somber satisfaction. There was no joy in this, no triumphant cheer, only a profound sense of weary closure. Justice in its own slow, grinding way had been served. But it hadn't brought Emily back. Nothing could. From my simple apartment, I followed the updates. The preliminary hearings, the formal indictments. Aiden's lawyers, once so confident, now seemed resigned, fighting for damage control rather than acquittal. He was denied bail, deemed a flight risk and a danger to potential witnesses. His world, which had seemed so impenetrable, had imploded. I spent my days in a strange limbo. The intense focus that had driven me, the meticulous planning, the constant vigilance, it was all gone. A gaping void remained where purpose had been. I found myself walking for hours through the quiet neighborhoods of LA, observing people, their mundane routines, their small joys and sorrows. I saw the vibrant city, no longer as a backdrop for my grief and revenge, but as a complex tapestry of human lives, each with its own story, its own quiet battles. My phone rang. It was Detective Sanchez. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Mr. Smith, her voice was firm, yet held a note of something akin to respect. I wanted to thank you. Your information was invaluable. Vance's testimony, combined with the recording Michelle Du Bois provided, left Marshall with no viable defense regarding his wife's death. He's taking a plea. First-degree murder, financial fraud, obstruction. Life without parole, minimum 30 years before review, but realistically, he'll die in prison. Good, I said, the word feeling hollow. He deserves it. He does, she agreed. I also wanted to acknowledge something, Mr. Smith. You're an unusual man. The way this all unfolded, the timing, the precision of the initial tips. I have a strong suspicion you played a larger role than you let on. You connected dots no one else could, or would. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it. I just listened. I don't have proof, Mr. Smith, she continued, her voice softening slightly. And even if I did, you brought a murderer to justice. You exposed a massive financial fraud. You did what the system, in its slow, cumbersome way, might have struggled to do alone. Sometimes justice finds its own path. Thank you, Mr. Smith. And I'm truly sorry about your daughter. Thank you, Detective, I replied, a genuine warmth spreading through me for the first time in a long while. Her words, acknowledging the unseen, were a small balm. Take care. After the call, I felt a peculiar mixture of relief and melancholy. The rage, the burning need for vengeance, had finally dissipated, leaving behind a vast, quiet landscape of grief. I was no longer driven by the singular purpose of destroying Aiden. That chapter was closed. But the question remained, what now? Sam, ever the pragmatist, had already disappeared back into his shadows. He sent me a single, final encrypted message. Job done, old man. Go home. Rest. Home. My small, quiet house in New England. It felt a million miles away. It felt empty. The silence of the house, once a comfort, now seemed like a reminder of everything I had lost. My wife, Emily's mother, years ago. And now, Emily herself. I went to Emily's apartment, or what was left of it. The police had cleared it, the last of her belongings now in storage, awaiting my instructions. I walked through the empty rooms, the echoes of her laughter, her dreams, her youthful struggles. I picked up a small, framed photo, Emily and her mother, smiling, arms linked, years ago. They were both gone. An internal conflict raged within me. I had buried my past for decades, chosen a life of quiet anonymity, a life devoid of the violence and moral ambiguities that had once defined me. I had convinced myself that I was no longer that man, the one who navigated the shadowy corners of the world, making hard choices. But the death of my daughter had ripped that mask away, revealing the old self, sharper, more ruthless than ever. Was this who I truly was? A man destined to walk in shadows, to right wrongs outside the law? Or could I return to my quiet life, having finally avenged my child? The answer, I realized, lay not in what I could do, but in what I would do. The world was full of Aiden Marshalls, full of hidden injustices, of vulnerable people exploited by the powerful. My unique skill set, my network, my unyielding resolve, They were not relics of a past life, but tools that had proven devastatingly effective. I knew I couldn't go back to being entirely John Smith, the harmless old-timer. That illusion was shattered. I had seen the monster within myself, and I had used it to destroy another. But perhaps, just perhaps, I could use that power, not for vengeance, but for justice. Not to rebuild an empire, but to protect the innocent. To become a silent guardian, a collector of debts that the system often overlooked. I looked out the window of Emily's empty apartment at the sprawling city below. It was a place of endless stories, of both light and darkness. And I, John Smith, was now ready to write a new chapter in my own. Months later, the crisp air of early autumn was a balm against my skin, a stark contrast to the relentless sunshine of Los Angeles. I stood before Emily's headstone in a quiet cemetery back home, nestled among rolling hills and ancient oaks. The stone was simple, elegant, just like her, Emily Rose Smith Marshall, beloved daughter, 1989 to 2023. No mention of her husband, no lingering ties to the man who had extinguished her light. That final indignity had been swiftly removed, erased from the public record of her life. I had brought a small bouquet of white roses, her favorite. I laid them gently on the cool granite, the petals soft beneath my calloused fingers. The world around me was still, serene, far removed from the concrete jungles and ruthless machinations of my recent past. Here, there was only the rustle of leaves, the distant song of a bird, and the quiet rhythm of my own breathing. "Hey, I whispered, my voice rough with emotion, yet surprisingly clear. It was a private conversation, just us. It's done. He's where he belongs. Life without parole. He won't see the outside world again. He won't hurt anyone else. The money, what could be salvaged, went to that charity you loved for young artists. It's not much, but it's yours. It's what you would have wanted." I paused, picturing her face, her bright, hopeful eyes. "I know this isn't how you wanted things to end. You deserved so much more. You deserved to paint those worlds, to live your dreams. And I should have seen it, should have stopped him sooner. But I promise you, sweet girl, he paid for every tear you shed, for every breath you struggled for. He paid for taking you from me." A bitter wind stirred the leaves around me, a silent witness to my confession. The journey had been long, arduous, and emotionally draining. I had plumbed depths of cunning and ruthlessness I thought I had buried decades ago. The quiet man who tended his garden and read classic novels had, for a time, ceased to exist. In his place was the ghost of a past life, a hunter who understood the scent of prey and the art of the trap. And that man had delivered a cold, undeniable justice. As I stood there, a profound realization washed over me. The vengeance, while satisfying in its execution, hadn't healed the wound of her absence. That was a pain I would carry forever, a hollow ache that would never truly fade. But it had, undeniably, brought a sense of completion. The gnawing injustice, the suffocating rage that had consumed me, had finally found its release. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the small, worn compass I always carried, a relic from my other life, always pointing true north, a reminder of direction and purpose. I turned it over in my palm. My life, the one I tried so hard to build, the quiet, uneventful one, was irrevocably changed. I couldn't simply put the mask back on. The world had seen glimpses of the wolf beneath the sheep's clothing, and more importantly, I had seen it too. Sam reached out. I continued, speaking to Emily as if she were right beside me. "He's back in the shadows, doing what he does best. And Detective Sanchez, she knows. She doesn't have proof, but she knows. There's a mutual understanding, a silent acknowledgement." I took a deep breath, the scent of damp. I took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filling my lungs. It was the smell of home, of cycles, of endings and beginnings. My conversation with Emily, or rather, my monologue to her silent memory, continued. I think about it a lot. I confessed, my gaze sweeping across the peaceful landscape. Why I chose to walk away all those years ago. to be John Smith, to try and be a different man for your mother, for you. I wanted to leave the shadows behind, to build something real, something safe. And I did, for a time. A wry, almost sad smile touched my lips. But the shadows, they never truly leave you, do they? They just wait. Wait for a reason to emerge. And you, my sweet girl, were the most powerful reason imaginable. I closed my eyes, remembering the cold fury that had consumed me, the calculating precision with which I had dismantled Aiden's world. It wasn't just instinct. It was skill, honed over years in unforgiving environments, a strategic mind that could map out vulnerabilities and exploit them with surgical accuracy. That man, the one who had brought Aiden Marshall to his knees, was still very much a part of me. And that realization, instead of filling me with dread, now brought a peculiar sense of clarity. I couldn't unlearn what I knew. I couldn't erase the past, but I could redefine its purpose. My retirement had been an escape, my anonymity, a shield. But what if it could be something more? What if the invisibility, the quiet observation, the hidden network could be a tool for something beyond personal vengeance? I imagine the countless untold stories out there, the quiet injustices, the powerful preying on the weak, the systems failing those who needed them most. Not all were as grand or as dramatic as Aiden Marshall's downfall, but each carried its own weight of suffering. I remembered the look in Michelle Du Bois's eyes, the weary resignation of Dr. Lee, the quiet desperation of Emily's last message. There were always victims, and there were always those who slipped through the cracks. I won't be that man who just sits by him, I promised, my voice gaining a new strength, a quiet resolve. Not anymore. I tried. I really did. But some battles, they find you, whether you want them or not. And if they do, then I'll fight them. Not for anger, not for revenge, not always, but for what's right. For those who can't fight for themselves. My arc, I understood now, wasn't about returning to who I was before. It was about integrating all parts of myself. The quiet gardener, the grieving father, and the strategic operator. All of them now coalesced into a whole, tempered by sorrow, sharpened by experience, and guided by a newfound, albeit weary, sense of purpose. I felt a faint sense of lightness, a subtle shift in the heavy burden I had been carrying. It wasn't happiness, not in the traditional sense. It was more profound, more enduring. It was peace, the kind of peace that comes not from forgetting, but from acceptance. Acceptance of loss, acceptance of self, and acceptance of a new path forward. I reached down, picking up a fallen oak leaf, its edges crisp with the touch of autumn. I crumbled it gently in my hand, the dry fragments falling back to the earth. Life and death, decay and renewal. It was all part of the same relentless cycle. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I turned from Emily's grave. I walked away from the cemetery, not looking back. My steps were firm, deliberate. The old man, John Smith, was still there, but he was no longer just a ghost of a past life. He was a presence, solid and resolute, ready to face whatever the world might throw at him next. He had avenged his daughter, and in doing so, he had found a new reason to exist. Not to forget, but to remember. Not to hide, but to act. My final thoughts as I drove away from the cemetery were not of bitterness, but of quiet strength. Some people think that revenge is a dish best served cold. I mused aloud, the words echoing in the quiet confines of my car. I, however, believe it's a dish best served on time. And my time had come. Now, the table is cleared, and I'm ready for the next course. For Emily, and for all the others. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense of quiet power. The dragon had awoken, and it was just beginning its true journey.